The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
This week's guest is Vince Galko, currently the Senior Vice President of Mercury Public Affairs. Vince brings over 15 years of experience and is recognized as one of Pennsylvania's top Republican political strategists. He's been on the show numerous times. Vince was formerly the regional administrator for the United States Department of Education. He was also a senior advisor to United States Senator Pat Toomey. He was a senior advisor to U.S. Congressman Pat Meehan, as well as U.S. Congressman Lou Barletta. He was the regional political director for former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani's presidential campaign, directing efforts in 14 states. He was also the former campaign manager for former United States Senator Rick Santorum. He was the former deputy director of President George W. Bush's re-election campaign in Pennsylvania in 2004. He was also the former executive director of the Pennsylvania Republican Party in 2005. Educationally, Vince received his degree from St. Joseph's University in International Relations and Economics. On today's show, we will discuss the current state of the Republican presidential primary, still with 8 hopefuls. We will prologue the presidential debate coming up on the Republican side, as well as winners and losers of the last debate. Vince will also give his predictions on how the race will develop. Of course, I will join in with these festivities and enjoy very much these political discussions.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Vince, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Great to be back.
Well, let's start right in. There's so much to talk to you about. But we have the melee, for lack of a better word, going on with 8 or 9 candidates for the Republican nomination for the presidency of the United States. We have governors and former governors. We have a U.S. senator. We have it seems like there's always one billionaire in the mix, and we have one of them, a tech billionaire no less. Kind of your overview of the Republican primary, where it stands, and where you think it's heading.
As a Republican, I would say, one, it's heartening to see that we have such a good stable of candidates on the Republican side, any of which I think would do a great job as president. But you handicapped it correctly. I think, right now you have Donald Trump somewhat sucking all the oxygen out of the room. The next tier candidate is Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida, and then it's kind of everyone else. And they're all good candidates. They all bring strengths to the table. Governor Christie, who's a Northeast governor, I think it would be great to see a Northeast Republican as president, but obviously he's got a tough road to hoe in a Republican primary. Governor Haley, Senator Tim Scott, all great people. Vice President Pence. So we have a good crew of candidates to pick from. But right now it seems like this could shape up to a 2-horse race. I believe Donald Trump was elected because people were just sick of the way things were going on in D.C. It was the same families over and over again running D.C., working the same events. And they may have thought Donald Trump may be a little crazy, might be a little out there, may not be the type of guy that I want my daughter to date, but at least he's going to go to Washington, maybe knock some tables over, do some things differently.
He did that.
And he did. And I think that for the most part, you ask people, they weren't all that dissatisfied with his policies. You can't argue with where the economy was headed during pre-COVID. You can't argue with his foreign affairs success, whether it be Middle East or elsewhere. So people were happy with that.
The border control.
Right. But then he kind of went off the rails during COVID, and certainly all the way up through the election, very tight election. So what happened there is why he lost such a close election, I believe, is that those independents and those discerning Democrats that voted for him the first time around aren't going to be there for him this time. Right. And they're not coming back.
They weren't there for him in 2020.
That's right. They're not coming back for him. And the reason I say they're not coming back for him is because just look at the elections since he's left office. Even the 2 special elections in Georgia for Senate, just months after he left office, his negative effect on those elections. They single-handedly gave the Democrats the U.S. Senate, those 2 elections. So, and whether it's running for mayor, for local judge, for statewide judge, we've seen time and time again, the independents and they said those discerning Democrats are not coming back to the party because of the Trump effect. So I think right now Governor DeSantis is in the best position, I believe, to capture that, because what he has, he checks many of the boxes that the Trump voters liked. He's strong on the border. He's strong on national defense. Got a great economic policy. His response to COVID has been praised. I mean, Florida, thrived without all the restrictions. Had basically the same or better health outcomes. So I think that he checks many of the boxes that Trump voters like, without all the baggage that comes with it. So, and you've been there from the start. You can speak to that from the very beginning of his announcement. I think you can speak to that better than anyone.
Well, yes. I, in fact, did a show from Miami Beach at the Four Seasons where he did announce. That was the week of Memorial Weekend back in late May. Did a show from there. And, I was, in a position at that point to see very much the inner workings of how a presidential campaign starts. Had access directly to the governor and to some of his most senior advisors, as I talked about in that show. He had just bad luck and bad timing in a sense that's when the first indictments had already hit just prior, and more were in the pipeline. So right when he was announcing, instead of having to use a phrase you used, to have all the oxygen in the room on himself, all of a sudden he was kind of on page 2 because, there was the Trump issue and what kind of indictments and how many and where. The New York Bragg indictment had already occurred, and then there were others. So there was that distraction in the room, and it clearly had an effect early on. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we're coming to a point in politics that's kind of unique. We almost had this with the Trump-Hillary battle. We have it again this time around where both parties are on the verge of nominating someone who's the only person that can lose the nomination. It's kind of unique. Biden's the only one that can lose to Trump. Trump's the only one that can lose to Biden, right?
Exactly.
If either party nominates someone else, they can almost walk to victory.
And they're not doing it.
And it's quite amazing to see. And that just goes to show you how different a primary voter is, especially in Pennsylvania. A Republican primary voter is dramatically different than a general election voter. And the Democratic Party is the same thing. We're seeing even, just recently we see a very far left progressive wants to challenge Bobby Casey because he's not far left enough. So even they have their own problems on the Democratic side as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the course of the next several weeks. And I think that you can't downplay the effect of finances on a campaign. Right. They always say money is the lifeblood of politics. It's a necessary evil. You want to hire staff. You want to run digital ads and be on TV and send mail, or even just hold rallies that cost dollars. So when you look at these candidates, I got to know Senator Tim Scott a little bit. You mentioned my work with Lou Barletta. When Lou was elected, his freshman class included Tim Scott, congressman, and Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota.
Right.
And so it was a really impressive class, and I spent some time with those folks. Very impressive people. Governor Haley's tremendous, and obviously Mike Pence has carried the Republican banner in a great way for many years. So, but can they raise the money? That's the big thing. Can they stay viable? Certainly, Governor Christie's relationships in the Northeast. I think he has a network of donors, and but certainly Governor DeSantis, I think above all other others, probably has the best chance of being able to maintain a solid, serious campaign throughout. Waiting to see what happens with former President Trump. Does he stay in? Does he run? Does he get indicted? Is he forbidden from running? So all those things happen. I think the staying power of the DeSantis campaign probably outweighs all the others.
Well, on my personal note, that's what I'm hoping for. The reason I think Governor DeSantis, to your point, has the staying power is because for the next better part of 3.5 more years, he's the governor of one of the most richest states in the union, and that's, of course, Florida. And that's a card that others can't use. So I think he will have the money to stay in the race. Obviously, Vivek Ramaswamy is a billionaire. He'll have the money to stay in the race. Trump, also a billionaire, obviously will have the money. But it's funny, he still needs to raise it. And if the reports are true, it seems like sucking more and more money out of that fund are his legal defense costs. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, first off, I hope Governor Christie decides to run for the soon-to-be-vacated U.S. Senate seat in New Jersey. That would be great.
Menendez, right?
But, excellent point. I mean, you certainly have self-funders over the course of the years running for president or other offices that can write a check and stay in the race as long as they want. Just recently, Governor DeSantis came to Pennsylvania, did a multi-stop visit. You were part of that as well, I believe, and raised a considerable amount of funds in Pennsylvania. I don't know of any other candidate, probably other than President Trump, that could have done that. Right. Has the network to be able to pull it off, of people in the state supporting him, but also people willing to come together and write a check, whether it be for $50 or $5,000. He had a great turnout. I think there were Harrisburg, Pittsburgh.
Yes. Yeah. Well, is again, I think at least some of my audience knows that will remember that initial show. I was invited to be a player in the DeSantis campaign. I was invited this past summer in July out to Park City, Utah. It's been well known and documented now that there was some reshuffling in the DeSantis campaign. They were in a direction that wasn't panning out. They had to go in a different direction. I participated in some of those high-end meetings with their senior advisors and political consultants. And I was with the governor, as you mentioned. It was the day after Labor Day. I was with him pretty much all day. I was with him in Harrisburg. I was one of the event hosts, along with our mutual good friend, Senator Greg Rothman, who also hosted. And then was with him again at the evening one, which was at downtown Pittsburgh at the Duquesne Club. I was an event host there, along with the main host was former United States Congressman Keith Rothfus. But there were a lot of key players there. But yeah, I had the pleasure of the governor's company. I had lunch with him and took him around the room. I also took him around the room in Pittsburgh as well. So it was, again, kind of eye-opening in how presidential campaigns run. But to your point, he raised a significant amount of money. I helped in some of that. It's impressive that he can come up here this early, still months out, actually a half a year out from when the Pennsylvania primary probably will be. And there's still a strong, in the financial areas of fundraising, a strong Trump presence. So to be able to raise that money was significant.
Right. Yeah, I think, again, he's probably the only one other than the former president that can pull that off. Other aspect of this is that you have, the grassroots side of politics. You have the grassroots supporters, the county party chairman, and everybody from, state rep to state senator to, United States congressman who are on the ballot next year. And they want to know what that top of ticket's going to look like. And I think they got some good news this week that Dave McCormick's going to be running for U.S. Senate, which I think helps the Republican ticket. And I know there's a lot of uneasiness amongst Republicans, especially those in the suburban areas, about who's running for president. And that's a big difference, because I can tell you, having run campaigns in the state for a few decades now, top of the ticket is everything. And when you're running in a swing area like a Chester County or Montgomery County, even up here nowadays, the back mountain Luzerne counties, those voters have changed quite a bit. The Poconos have changed quite a bit. They don't want a hardcore person from either side of the party, right? They want someone who's going to be compromising, talking about the fiscal issues, the kitchen table issues, the issues that worry mom and pops every night. That's what they want, people talking about that. They don't want extremists from either side. And I believe there's that undercurrent right now in the Republican Party where there's a lot of people crossing their fingers hoping that it's anybody but Donald Trump, because it makes it a lot easier to campaign for them. When the top of the ticket comes to your hometown and does a rally and you don't want to be there as a state senator or as a congressman, that's not good for you or for the ticket as a whole.
Right.
When you're able to stand on stage and campaign with that person, makes a big difference up and down the ticket.
Well, Vince, we have time for our break. We're here today with my good friend and top Republican strategist, the firm Mercury Strategies. He's a senior vice president. Extensive credentials and experience in presidential races, U.S. Senate races, and and everything else. So we're hearing from him today. We're going to take a break to hear a view, which I often run on my show, and we'll be right back after that view. Today's editorial and my view, amazingly, will discuss former President Donald Trump's Rasputin-like mystical hold over a large swath of the Republican electorate. For you non-history majors, Rasputin was the treacherous and insidious cleric whose mystic influence helped lead Russian Tsar Nicholas II headlong into the Russian Revolution. Now that conundrum haunts the Republican presidential primary, like Jacob Marley's ghost. It is difficult to understand how Trump maintains a sizable lead over his closest pursuer, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, as well as the rest of a qualified field that can't even get into double digits. It is difficult to understand how Trump, who could not beat President Joe Biden in 2020, which was before the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, before civil judgments were found against him, before felony indictments too numerous to mention from different states as well as the federal government were filed, as well as the real possibility that he could be barred from holding the office even if he somehow miraculously wins. That somehow all this subtraction have failed to dent his standing with many Republicans. In other words, addition by subtraction. This view will be an attempt at an answer and possibly a road for the Republican Party to move out of the wilderness. I will quote from an editorial in the New York Times from Frank Luntz, a focus group moderator, pollster, and professor, and communication strategist who has worked for Republican candidates. Mr. Luntz has spent more than 3 decades analyzing politics and grappling with political questions in classrooms as well as elections. In the editorial, Mr. Luntz discusses the more than 24 focus groups he's hosted with Trump voters across the country. The common theme from all of this information that was gleaned was that many Trump voters felt ignored and forgotten by the professional political class until Trump came along, and are now being victimized and ridiculed for their continued support. Luntz believes that the current crop of Republican candidates have to accept that pummeling Trump and attempting to decimate his base will not work. It was clear that if Trumpers think that any of the current candidates' mission is to defeat their hero, they will fail. However, Luntz sees a way to victory for a candidate other than Trump, but only if that candidate convinces them that he or she wants to listen and learn from them. They'll give that person a chance. Luntz gives a playbook for how this could happen. Begin quote. First, beating Mr. Trump requires humility. It starts by recognizing that you can't win every voter. You can't win even half of them. But roughly a third of Trump voters prioritize the character of the country and the people who run it. And that's enough to change the 2024 outcome. It's about offering Republicans the contrast they seek. A candidate who champions Mr. Trump's agenda, but with decency, civility, and a commitment to personal responsibility and accountability. Second, Mr. Trump has become his own version of the much-hated political establishment. Mar-a-Lago has become Grand Central Terminal for politicians, political hacks, lobbyists, and out-of-touch elites who have ignored, forgotten, and betrayed the people they represent. Third, recognize that the average farmer, small business owner, and veteran will hold greater sway with the Trump voter than the famous and powerful. Fourth, compliment Mr. Trump's presidency while you criticize the person. Trump focus groups are incredibly instructive in helping differentiate between the passionate support most Trump voters feel for his efforts and his accomplishments, and the embarrassment and frustration they have with his comments and his behavior. Fifth, make it more about the grandchildren. Millions of Trump voters are old, really old. They love their grandchildren, so speak specifically about their grandkids, and their grandparents will listen as well. Sixth, there's one character trait that unites just about everyone: an aversion to public piety while displaying private dishonesty. In a word, hypocrisy. During the 2016 campaign, Trump condemned Barack Obama repeatedly for his occasional rounds of golf, promising not to travel at taxpayer expense. What was Trump's record? Question. Close to 300 rounds of golf on his own personal courses in just 4 years, costing hardworking taxpayers roughly $150 million in additional security. 7. You won't be elected with Republicans alone. The successful candidate must appeal to independents as well. But Trump alienated independents to such a degree that they abandoned Republicans and joined Democrats. And 8th, you need to penetrate the conservative echo chamber. You need at least one of these on your side: Mark Levin, Dennis Prager, Ben Shapiro, Newt Gingrich, and, of course, Tucker, Hannity, or Laura. In 2016, the campaign was about what Trump could do for you. Today, it's about what is being done to him. If he becomes increasingly unhinged, or if his opponents focus on his tweets, his outbursts, and his destructive personality, a sizable number of Republicans will choose someone else. End quote. Mr. Luntz has established a pretty good path for the Republicans to choose a different nominee. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin employed a number of the itemized suggestions and won a shocking victory in Virginia, a state Biden won by double digits in 2020. So it's been proven that they work. Now it's up to the Republican Party. We're back again with Republican consultant Vince Galko. Vince, we only have a few minutes left on the show. Our first segment went so long because it was good stuff we were talking about. A couple of other points. One of the ones was that Nikki Haley's performance. We didn't get enough into her. There were clearly polls that showed that they thought she had done very well and won the debate. Your thoughts on her?
Sure. I mean, I think she's terrific. She was a great governor. If you want to know anything about Nikki Haley, just go on YouTube and pull up some of her speeches from the UN during any of these recent crises in the Middle East, Ukraine. I mean, she's just tremendous, and really stands up for American patriotism. So, her rhetoric and her ability to speak is terrific, and she would be a great president. Difficulty for her is that she has a fellow South Carolinian, Tim Scott, running, so
yes.
It makes it very difficult to raise money in your state. It makes it difficult to split the vote. So, but certainly a very strong and powerful leader.
Yeah. Well, I thought though one of the potential negatives of her, and look, she of all the other candidates other than Christie, who pretty much stayed away from Donald Trump, or said they liked his policies, were actually more favorable toward him. The one that was still against him clearly in that debate was where she pretty much said he was unelectable. One of, I think, her issues is that she's kind of flip-flop on the whole Donald Trump thing.
Right.
First of all, an ardent supporter and in his cabinet. Then kind of went the other way and was negative about him and was down on him and clearly had alienated Trump, all the true Trump, the MAGA supporters, Trump supporters, had alienated them. And she was the one on stage, other than Christie, that took not direct frontals like Christie, but pretty much said, the election denying, some of the wrong things that have hurt the party, as well as, I think at one point specifically, that he's not electable, so we have to move on. So that could be something she has to deal with, because clearly the other candidates on that stage were looking to gather Trump support in a second case. Let's now turn, because we mentioned him, and he's the other one in that 5, 6, 7% range. African American, well-liked and popular United States Senator from South Carolina. I can't remember when a serious contender for the Republican nomination was an African American, so he's clearly a different candidate. Very intelligent, articulate, well-spoken. His campaign doesn't seem to be catching fire, but what are your thoughts about his performance and where does he go?
Yeah, just a solid guy. I mean, he's right on all the issues, I think, for Republicans. Great speaker. And he's, got ties into the Christian community. The Christian vote's very important. I think he's going to do very well in that group of voters. For him, it comes down to, can I raise the money to sustain a campaign over the course of the next several months? In terms of debates, in terms of, one-on-one meetings, he's going to do terrific. He's a great guy. So I think he will have probably one of the, when it comes down to the final 4 or 5, I think Tim Scott will be one of those standing.
Still there. And one other just question I had, again, I have some inside information, obviously, because I was out in Utah at the private retreat and campaign strategizing. And not just there in Utah in the DeSantis campaign, but everything I read, everybody pretty much thought, since he's the overwhelming second choice, and I mean Governor DeSantis, that he would, on that stage, since there was no Donald Trump and he didn't show up, he would get most of the fire, because he's the one up in the 20s, and everybody, and then, of course, Trump is above him. But then after him, there's a pretty big drop down to 5, 6, 7%, 4%. So that he would be the natural target for a lot of the other. No one said a word about him. And I also think that a little bit discombobulated him to a degree, because he clearly had prepared. I know for sure he had prepared to be attacked, and he wasn't. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was probably smart strategy by the other Republicans. Why give him the free time, right? Why make him seem to be the victim or the leader on the stage? They'd rather talk about themselves or the issues that matter. So, and I also if you look back to the debates, going back to 2016. Where all the candidates were attacking Donald Trump, so it gave him twice as much airtime. So they probably learned from that as well. But I think it was, part of it was that it was kind of the first debate, getting to know each other type of debate. But also they didn't want to give him the free time.
Yeah. The one person that, again, from what I've read, and as a former trial lawyer, I'm real careful about hearsay, and I say I understand this is hearsay. It appears the one person, the black hat guy on that debate stage, that pretty much universally everybody didn't like was Vivek. That
Right.
seemed to be, they didn't like him so much. I don't think he did anything to engender that they would like, of course, as well. So
Yeah, I think he just tried to upstage them all, and,
Yeah,
and
he did,
and
to a
truly
degree.
didn't take it serious enough. I think
Yeah.
for the magnitude of being the leader of the free world is the job you're applying for.
And one final point. In this debate, as I said, this show will air right after the second debate. We've covered the subject matter pretty well, though. We're down 2 already. We lost Asia Hutchinson, and we lost Burgum, the governor of, is it South Dakota?
Yeah,
Yeah.
North Dakota.
No, North
Yeah,
Dakota. Yeah, Doug Burgum, at any rate. So we lost 2 governors from the debate stage. They didn't qualify, and the trend is that they're going to keep up in the ante, and that should start to shrink the debate stage. So, so that should allow more time and all that. But
Which makes total sense. That's the right strategy. You have to, at a certain point, you have to thin the herd a little bit and get down to those who are the serious contenders who can actually mount a campaign to win the presidency.
yeah, no question about it. Well, it'll be interesting to see this debate. You have to at least mention also somewhat interesting. I just read yesterday that there's going to be a special debate between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and California Governor Gavin Newsom. And you want to talk about polar opposites? You have Governor DeSantis, conservative, red state, took a very anti-government, kept everything open, no masks, no vaccine requirements in his state of Florida. And then you had the other extreme. You have a far left, progressive California governor in Gavin Newsom, who followed the CDC and Fauci, who shut everything down. Everybody had the vaccine mandates, So you have that issue, and obviously they are polar opposites in terms of ideology. But that also should give a pretty good stage for Governor DeSantis to a little bit separate himself. We talked about how do you do that without setting yourself on fire.
Right.
So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if I was Governor DeSantis, I'd be doing everything possible to get as many Republicans to watch that debate as possible. I would be plugging at the debate coming up, saying, make sure you watch my upcoming debate with Governor from California. It's because, keep in mind, he's not talking to the Democrats of California. He's not talking to the general electorate at this point.
Yeah.
He's talking to Republican primary voters.
Right.
And being able to go up against the Governor of California provides a perfect setting for him.
Yeah, the Prince of Darkness as far as Republicans are concerned, or he's the epitome of the far left and their handling progressive governors and how they handle the pandemic. So, regrettably, as always, we ran out of time, Vince, but thank you so much for your insight and your knowledge. Again, we're here today with my good friend, Republican strategist Vince Galko, getting his thoughts on we're about to have, well, when this show airs, it will have occurred. But in another day, there will be the Republican debate from when we're actually airing this or taping this show. So obviously, that'll reshuffle the deck again. It'll be interesting to see the outcome of that debate. That's why we spend so much time kind of talking about. The Democratic side is pretty well set, barring anything unforeseeable at this point. It still appears that no one has, other than Bobby Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., who has also been on this show, by the way, Vince, back in the day. But at any rate, other than that, he's not gotten past, Kennedy hasn't gotten much past 20%, which means it's looking clearly now it's going to be Biden and Kamala Harris as vice president again. So we'll see. That's what's fun about this business. We'll be back next week at 10:30.